What's going on, guys? Welcome to another bike commuting vlog here in Japan. Today we're going to be talking about the story of how I learned Japanese, how I became fluent in Japanese, and how long it took me to become fluent in Japanese. So it's kind of a mix of these different stories. For those of you who are new to the channel, my name's Cruz. I've been living and working in Japan for over 4 years now, and I make videos on this channel about cycling, life in Japan, and recently bike commuting in Japan. So I get asked a lot on this channel, how did you learn to speak Japanese so well? How long did it take you to learn Japanese? Is learning Japanese difficult? And it's difficult to talk about one of these topics without going over all of them. So I thought I'd go over that today on today's commute. So I started learning Japanese almost 10 years ago in my last year of university. So I went to a 4-year university in the US, and I actually didn't start taking a Japanese class until my last year. So my 4th year, my senior year, that's when I had my first exposure to learning the Japanese language. I did have some experience with hearing the language before that, just from watching like anime. A lot of you guys know I'm a big nerd, so I did watch some anime with subtitles, so I had heard some Japanese before in the background, but I never really studied it until my 4th year of university when I was about 21 years old. So a lot of people have this misconception that you can only learn languages when you're young. It's not true. I didn't start until I was 21, which is still kind of young, but I know people who start learning languages at a much later date and they can do pretty well. Before that, I had no real experience learning another language. I took the mandatory like French class, but never really actually learned to speak or ever used that knowledge in the class, just memorized some vocabulary words and was done with that. Didn't really have any interest in pursuing the language any further. So why Japanese? I'm going to keep this short and maybe talk about this in a separate video, but basically, long story short, I'm a nerd. My roommate wanted to take the Japanese class and sort of dragged me along with him to go to the class because he didn't want to go alone, and I ended up agreeing and ended up really liking the class. I didn't actually register for the class because I was already over on my credit hours, so I actually was just auditing the class. I asked the teacher, is it okay if I just come to the class and I don't need the credit, I don't need anything, I just want to learn the language. And after the first class, I really liked the teacher. She was really entertaining, and I really liked the idea that I could learn a language that used a different alphabet system. I think that was one of the big drivers for me. When you learn French, you don't really learn anything new, you just learn the same alphabet with a couple different accents, and the pronunciation changes. So it's just kind of, I guess it felt a little boring to me. But learning Japanese, I had to learn everything from scratch, learning a new alphabet. We didn't use Romaji in the class, so a lot of you guys, I'm sure, know there's different writing systems in Japanese. Romaji is when you use the Roman characters, and kanji is the Chinese characters, and katakana and hiragana are the different Japanese variations. So there's actually 4 different alphabets that you can use in learning Japanese, and to me, that was really exciting. It really piqued my interest, really made me want to learn Japanese. So right from the beginning, I became addicted. After the first class, I was like, this is awesome, I'm gonna do this. And I think how long it takes you to become fluent in Japanese is based on how much time you're putting in. So if you're only putting in like 20 minutes a day, you're not gonna get anywhere near the results of someone who's studying like an hour a day or multiple hours a day. So I became obsessed with learning the language. I made a whole bunch of flashcards, and I just started labeling everything in my room. So at this time I was in a dorm room with my roommate who was also taking the class with me, and we just became obsessed. We learned hiragana in the first week or 2 weeks, I think. We both decided we wanted to learn it as quick as possible, so we memorized it all in a week, and we just started making all these hiragana cards, putting them all over our apartment, labeling everything like the toilet, this is a wall. And that started to help improve our vocabulary and get us used to using hiragana. So for anyone who's considering learning Japanese or is learning Japanese, my number one tip right from the beginning, don't use Romaji. From the very beginning, start with at least hiragana. And if you can help it, learn katakana too at the same time. It should only take a week or two. So that's what we did. We just had a hiragana katakana frenzy, and we plastered all these flashcards all over our apartment, our dorm room. I guess if I go in too much detail in this video, this will be a really long story. Luckily, I've got a nice long, hour-long commute to go in as much detail as I can. So anyway, my class started with about, I think there were a bit over 20 people in the beginning, and as the class went on, a lot of people were just dropping out like really fast. I think a lot of people were interested, they liked Japanese culture, they wanted to learn the language, but they didn't realize how much work was actually required to learn the language. So we dropped a lot of people in the class within the first week, and I think by the second week we were down to less than 10 people. So it was pretty crazy dropout rate. But me and my roommate were both pretty into it, pretty dedicated, and probably other people in our class hated us because we were going at a faster pace than the rest of the class. We were kind of going at a faster pace than the teacher was teaching us at, and we were asking the teacher to go faster because we wanted to learn more. I think that's something that makes a huge difference when learning anything, when learning a language, and that's having a passion for it. So for me, I was really passionate about learning Japanese. I made it my number one priority. Around the same time, I was also aiming to become a professional cyclist. I made it to a pretty high level, to a domestic elite team in the US. I was traveling the national circuit, but I became so obsessed with learning Japanese that became my priority over cycling, over racing. I think at the time I was just looking for a new goal, something to work for. So I was able to make some really significant progress in my first year. So pro tips, if you're starting out, you're thinking about starting out, you gotta be passionate about it, you gotta be dedicated about it, you gotta make a studying routine. We were studying every day, not just like a dedicated like 30 minutes a day, but morning, middle of the day, class, and after class, we were constantly quizzing each other. I think that was another thing that really helped me, is I had a partner to work through this together with, and not just a partner, but a partner who was at the same level. We were both beginners, we were both starting out at the same level, and we were both passionate, and so it was great. We would quiz each other just randomly in the morning, in the evening, and if we saw each other, we just whip out one of our flashcards and quiz each other. It was really fun time. So some more detail about my school. We actually had a lot of Japanese exchange students. So my Japanese teacher was actually this Japanese lady, and she was in charge of the international students at the school, and there were a lot of Japanese exchange students. Some of them were there for the soccer team, they were on the athletic scholarship, and some other students were there just to improve their English. So a lot of Japanese students will go to more rural universities in the US. At this time, I was at a university in Kentucky. I changed universities like 4 times. I think I talked about this in another video. But anyway, at this university, there were a lot of Japanese and other international students that came to learn English, just because it's a lot easier for them to assimilate and adapt to the more small town country area than it is to the big city, where there's just a lot more dangers lying around and things that they have to adapt to. So a lot of them come to these more rural, small town colleges. And that was good for me because I was able to make a lot of Japanese friends. I was getting really excited because I was really enjoying learning the language. I really enjoyed the teacher. I enjoyed having this new challenge. And I enjoyed having all these new friends from these new cultures. So growing up, America is pretty diverse. We have a lot of different people living there. But at the same time, they're also very American. So even if you're like Asian, you're Asian American. You don't really change that much. We still have a lot of similarities, but there's a huge difference between like Asian American and, I don't want to say real, but people who come straight from Asia, they don't have that American culture. influence on them. And it was really cool meeting these people for the first time, talking to them, getting to know their experiences, what they liked, their sense of humor, and it was all just really, really exciting. So I didn't just make Japanese friends, I made a lot of different friends, like Korean friends, Chinese friends, people from Peru, Brazil. There were lots of cool people that I met in this college experience. That's part of me regrets a little bit going to college. Like I felt like I wasted some time and money because I didn't really learn anything, but I'm really glad that I went to college because I was able to make these acquaintances. And a couple months into starting learning Japanese, things were going pretty smoothly, and I was really excited, have high motivation every day. And my teacher introduced us to an opportunity that we could go study abroad in Japan. And at this time, I hadn't really thought about studying abroad because A, I didn't really have the money, B, I wanted to graduate as quickly as possible so I didn't waste any more money on college tuition and stuff like that. And I never really thought about going to another country other than, of course, to go become a professional cyclist in Europe, which was my goal for the previous few years before this. But when the opportunity presented itself, I became really excited about the idea. I decided I want to do this. I don't want to regret not taking this opportunity later in life. So I decided to postpone my graduation and go study abroad for a full year. And by doing this, I would postpone my graduation by a full year, paying an extra year in college tuition. But I figured if I don't do this, I'm going to regret it for the rest of my life. And I want to see how far I can go with this language. I want to be able to speak in another language and really kind of finish what I started. So that became my driving force. And around the same time, I actually got in a car accident. I got hit by a car and had some damage to my knee. And that kind of was the end of my cycling career for a while. So I decided I'm done with cycling and I'm just going to focus all 100% in learning Japanese, and that became my #1 priority. My obsession with learning the language had completely taken me over, and before we actually started our second semester of the Japanese class, me and my roommate had already gone through the entire textbook. So we were using, I believe it was the Contemporary Japanese textbook, and we were supposed to use one for the first semester and another one for the second semester or something like that. And we had both gone through the textbook for the second semester before the second semester even started. So we were just way beyond everyone else in the class. We still went to the class just to have the practice, but for the most part, we'd been studying on our own. We made a lot of Japanese friends. We were hanging out with them every day. Of course, the majority of our conversations would be in English, but we would still be able to pick up some Japanese from them and learn a couple new things. So things were going really well. And the university I decided to go study abroad at was actually the same university as one of the students who was there that became one of our friends. And that was really cool because we had a partnership exchange program with them. So they would usually send someone to our university and we would send someone to their university. So the university I decided to go to was Nagoya University of Foreign Studies. I had a couple different options. I could have gone to a university in Tokyo. I could have gone to a university in Kansai, and both of those options would have been much more expensive than the university in Nagoya. So one of the big motivators for me choosing Nagoya over those two cities was A, I didn't want to live in a super large city, and B, I wanted to make this trip as least expensive as possible because it was already going to cost me a lot of money to go. And C, I had a friend there. So my friend was going back to Japan. We would go back at the same time. I didn't know anyone at the other places, so it just seemed like the right choice at the time. I had a friend, it was cheaper, and it's not too crazy big of a city or anything like that. Hey Luke, that's one of my old coworkers. For the last 4 years here in Japan, I worked as a university lecturer, and I was working at the same university, Nagoya University of Foreign Studies. That guy we just passed, he's actually one of my old coworkers. I've changed jobs now. I now work over in the center of the city of Nagoya, and I work for a cycling distribution company. There's some other videos on here about my job if you're interested. But anyway, going into the first year of my study abroad, when I first arrived, man, it was so exciting. My first impressions though, I remember the airport was so hot, so humid. I arrived in about August, which is kind of like the peak of the heat and humid season in Japan, and coming from where I lived in the US, Michigan, which is kind of a cooler climate, it was a big shock to the system. I'm like, man, it's so hot here. Like, I used to have long hair, kind of like I do now, and I just cut it all off as soon as I got there because it was just too hot for me. But I can't really describe this feeling. Like, there's an exciting feeling when you travel, you go abroad to a new country for the first time. It's completely different when you go to live in a new country and you're thinking like, man, this is gonna be my home for the next year, especially if it's new to you. Like, I just graduated university. I've been focusing on cycling my entire life. Like, I never had this opportunity to just sort of go travel for long periods of time, because as for someone who's aiming to become a professional athlete, you're spending every day on your training, on your recovery, on your racing schedule. That's one of the things that really turned me off about becoming a pro cyclist, is just because I couldn't live a normal life. I couldn't do the other things I wanted to pursue. And that's one of the big reasons why I quit. So anyway, super excited to be in Japan. I moved into an international dormitory. We had about like 50 or so international students at my university, and about half of them lived in this international dormitory, which is really cool because it's just a lot of different people from lots of different places. So as an American, we were actually the minority in this group. There were lots of people from like the UK and different European countries, different Latin American countries, and Asian countries. So there were lots of Chinese as well. It was just sort of cool to be able to make all these new acquaintances. So every day I'm hanging out with these different people. But the bad thing is we're all speaking English, which of course isn't great. That's one of the first things I learned in this program, is not everyone holds the same motivation as you and are there for different purposes. The study abroad program actually had two programs. One was the language program and one was the culture program. So of course, all the people in the culture program are just there to party, have a good time, drink beers every night, and yeah, maybe learn a few Japanese words like konnichiwa. And I remember I was really frustrated at the time because, man, this is like my number one priority in my life. Like, I wanted to learn to speak Japanese as quickly as possible. And I was studying like crazy on my own. And I remember seeing these culture studies people partying every day, like no joke. And the worst part was all the British people, they got these like stipends to go study abroad from their government. So they were getting actually like paid to study abroad, whereas I'm spending all this money to go be there. And I see them drinking, they're getting paid to drink. And I'm like, man, I hate you guys. But all kidding aside, like, there were some cool people there, and I shouldn't be one to judge other people for what they make their priorities to be. So I made my own like sort of friend circle, people who were similar to me, who were really focused on learning the language. And I made some really good friends there, some friends who I'm still connected with today, and they were all placed all over the world, but we occasionally are able to meet, and that's really cool. This is where the story sort of starts to turn a little bit dark though. Like I mentioned, I originally planned on studying abroad for a full year, and some certain things were happening in my life at that time where I wasn't sure what I actually wanted to do. I was becoming a bit more nervous about my financial situation. I didn't know if I had enough money to complete the full study abroad, and I became really worried, like, what am I gonna do for my job after this? Like, all the pressures that happen to you once you're about to graduate university just started hitting me all at once. Like, why am I learning this language? Like, am I actually gonna use this in my career? And am I actually gonna be able to make a good salary for it? Because as I continued to learn the language, my progress wasn't as fast as I'd hoped. Like, I was a lot faster than some of the other people around me. Some of the people in my study abroad program with me who were in the same class as me. So when we arrive, we take a placement test. You get placed in a certain level, and I was placed in a pretty respectable level. All the people in my level were people who had been studying for like 3 years or so, and it was their major in Japanese. I was the only guy who was there who was like a business accounting major and just was taking it as a hobby. And then I was like, I'd only been studying 1 year, and they're like, what? So I was pretty high for the amount of studying that I'd been doing. But even then, I just started thinking about the future. What am I gonna do? What kind of job do I wanna do? This is stuff that I'd been avoiding thinking about because I've always been really bad about this. Like I mentioned, I changed universities 4 times. I changed my majors. I was originally like a biology medical major. I changed to an education major, mathematics major, and then I changed to business and accounting major. in my life, I've always had this problem, like I never knew what I wanted to do, and I hated the idea of picking one thing and that had to be the thing that I had to pursue. Like I was always interested in learning new things. Like I'm also a self-taught programmer. For those who don't know, I self-taught myself how to program websites in like middle school, and I've always just been interested in random different things, and the idea of picking one thing and making that your specialty, that's your job for the rest of your life, just sort of petrified me. And I think learning Japanese for me was kind of an escape from that reality, like, oh, this is something new, I can learn, I can challenge myself. But then when the time started to come where I actually had to decide my path of my future, I got really scared. It was like, what am I gonna do? Am I gonna stay here in Japan and use this language? Or am I gonna go home, not use this language, or maybe find a job where I can use this language? And I just had all these sort of negative thoughts. If I was gonna stay in Japan, the salaries aren't that great, honestly, compared to the US. Like, lots of people come here from other countries, like Vietnam, my wife's Vietnamese, and the salaries here are a lot better. They can improve the amount of money that they can make in a year. But for me, as a self-taught programmer, if I did a programming job in the US, I could start a job making like, I don't know, $40,000 a year as a starting position. But in Japan, it's really hard to find a job that gets you over 30 grand a year, especially as a foreigner, with room for like advancement and improvement. So I sort of started having all these negative thoughts. Combining that with, I think 2 unrealistic of expectations on myself. Like, I really wanted to become fluent in the language, as fluent as possible. And when I was speaking and I wasn't able to speak as well as I expected myself to be, I'd be really disappointed in myself. And Japanese takes so long to learn. Like, I think there's some research about how much time you need to become fluent in a language. For people who are learning from English, there's category 1 languages, category 2, 3, 4, 5. Category 5 takes the most time. Japan's in that category with a special asterisk, so that means it takes even more time than the other languages in that category. And there's just so many unique rules in Japanese, like different readings for the kanji. In this situation it's read this way, in this situation it's read this way. Different levels of speaking, so there's casual level of speaking, then there's more formal level of speaking. The thing I hated the most about my Japanese classes is they teach us like mid-formal level speaking, which is useless, because when you speak Japanese, you're either speaking to your friends or you're speaking to your boss or people like about your senpai. No one uses this mid-level formal speaking. So you're studying, learning to speak this way, but when you speak that way to your friends, they're like, what's wrong with you? Why are you speaking like a robot? And why are you speaking like we're not friends? But then if you speak that way to your boss or to your coworkers, it's not polite enough. So that's one thing that really irritated me throughout that whole program, is you have to learn to be able to speak at different levels to different people. And in my classes, they didn't properly teach that. It's something you have to do on your own, and it's just sort of this awkward thing that you have to go through. Really challenging. Something I still struggle with even today, because I speak Japanese with my wife every day, and we speak super casually. I'm like a master of casual Japanese now, and now I work in Japanese, so I speak in my work Japanese, and then there's the work cruise, and then there's the at-home cruise. Of course, this is true in any language that you're speaking. Even if I'm doing a job in English, like there's my normal English and then there's my work English, but it doesn't change that much. In Japanese, it changes a lot. But anyway, my main 2 problems were I was really disappointed in myself. I set too high of expectations. I wasn't meeting those expectations, and I became concerned that, is all this worth it? Is putting all of this effort into learning this language really worth it? I was looking for excuses. I was looking for a way to run out, and ultimately I decided to end my study abroad. Like, I was like, this isn't worth it. Like, I need to start worrying about my future. I need to start making money. I need to start making back all that money I spent on university in the first place. And I don't have time to just be sort of like having fun here in Japan, learning Japanese just for like my self-satisfaction. So I decided to cut my study abroad short, go back to the US, and I ended up working at a bank, because that was my major. I worked at a bank as a computer operations manager, so I was able to mix sort of my tech experience with my finance experience, and it was a really good job for a fresh out of college guy. I had my own office in a bank chain, and I worked there for a while before deciding to go back to school. I had a really good opportunity to go to graduate school. We're gonna go the secret route here. This is a driving school over here. Looks like a go-kart course. So anyway, I had a really good opportunity to go to graduate school and race for a cycling team. So I got a full scholarship. It was great, and I couldn't pass it up. So I decided to leave my bank job, go to university, and I chose a major in web development. So that was something I was already really knowledgeable about. I did some freelance web development for years, and it was something I was excited to do, a new program. And that school also had one of the strongest cycling teams in the country, and it was a fully supported varsity program, so I was able to travel, race around the country for that team while learning something new. I'm like, that is such a great opportunity. And during this time, I'd completely stopped learning Japanese. I was done with the language. It wasn't a part of my life anymore. Like, I still watched anime. I watched it with subtitles, and I was able to watch a decent amount without subtitles, so that was something nice, I guess, that I learned from that. I still had all my Japanese friends from before that I would occasionally talk to, but as for studying the language, I was done. I didn't do anything else. That was until I started this new graduate school program, and turns out at that school they also had a similar like study abroad exchange program with people from other countries, and there was a huge Japanese population there. There were about I think over 50 Japanese people studying abroad, going to do their MBAs there, and then of course some undergraduate people who go to study English before they enter the university as a 4-year university program. So there's other people who go there to study English until they can get to the point where they can actually enter the university and then do 4 years there in English. So there's lots of different study abroad programs that the Japanese people will do over here in the US. And one day I was just sort of playing ping pong with a friend in the dorm room, and I saw this big group of Japanese people, and I decided just to say something to them hey, I speak some Japanese, and I said it in Japanese, and then they just sort of freaked out. And it was kind of funny because we just all became really good friends, and the cycle sort of repeated itself. I started hanging out with them a lot, and they weren't all really good at speaking English, so we sort of communicated by a mix of my Japanese and their English, and it sort of reignited the passion for me. I'm like, this is really fun. I forgot how fun it is to learn Japanese, and dang it, I'm just gonna start studying again. So about, what was this, almost 2 years later, after no studying Japanese, I started picking it up again, and it was crazy how fast everything came back. Even though I forgot all of the kanji at first, after about a few weeks of studying again, it all just came back really quick, and I became super motivated to learn the language again. And when I finished grad school, actually, I went to go backpack in Japan and visit some of my Japanese friends that I made in grad school. And during that time, I landed a job interview in Japan and decided to end up moving there. So by this point, I'd become pretty fluent in Japanese. I had been I spoke with these Japanese friends every day, and some of them, we would only really speak Japanese. Other ones, we'd speak a mix of Japanese and English. It's kind of funny because often they would speak Japanese and I'd reply in English because that was the most comfortable for us. We'd both understand each other, and we didn't have to worry about how we had to translate what we wanted to say. We would often talk about random things. One of the guys, he just really loved debating, and he loved talking about random different interesting topics, which is really good for me because I was able to speak. Oh, where are you going? That's the beginner mark, by the way, so it's pretty obvious. They're a beginner driver. So anyway, with the one guy, we'd always talk about these random, different interesting topics, and it was really challenging at first. Even if I get really comfortable to the point where I could have a natural conversation about everyday kind of stuff, once you go into a new topic that you've never talked about before, for example, politics, or for example, healthcare, there's gonna be all these words that you don't know the proper word, and it's really frustrating because you're able to say everything else so well, but then you just lack certain vocabulary to be able to express what you want to say. And I really struggled with that for a while, but now I've gotten to the point where even if I don't know the correct vocabulary word, I just think of an alternative way to describe what I want to say, and I became just content with this is the level that I speak. So I speak Japanese now pretty fluently, I would say. I'm not a native, of course. There's certain ways I say things that a Japanese person wouldn't say it, but people can pretty much understand what I want to say, and I can get my point across, and I don't put those crazy expectations on myself anymore. Like, I've realized it's impossible for me to become a native speaker. That's never gonna happen. And you just gotta be, you can't put that much pressure on yourself. That's the biggest thing I've learned on this. If you put all that pressure on yourself, you're gonna end up resenting the language, hating the language, and there's no fun in that. So in total, it took years and years of ups and downs to actually become pretty fluent in the language for me. I think, to sum things up, in the first year, I became pretty proficient in Japanese. Like, I had a really solid base of vocabulary. I was able to talk about basic things, like basic conversations, and I had no real problem. My biggest problem was I was mostly disappointed in myself because I wanted to be able to say things in multiple different ways. I didn't want to sound too repetitive, and I didn't like having such a limited vocabulary. But in terms of learning Japanese and becoming like basically proficient, you should be able to get there, I think, in about a year or so. But if you actually want to master the language, be able to speak about a variety of different subjects and do so comfortably, that's going to take years. So I went through multiple struggles, as you can see. It's not easy learning a new language. There's always times where you just want to give up. You want to find excuses to just not do this anymore, find something else to do. There's so many things that could happen that will push you off the path towards learning Japanese or whatever language that you want to learn. But in the end, I'm really happy that I pushed through all those things, even like the hard times and everything. It's been an amazing experience. It's changed my life, and now I'm living here in Japan, and I think my experience living here in Japan is just a lot better because I'm able to rely on myself for everything that I need to do. I don't need to rely on other people to help me with basic things anymore. I can do everything on my own. So yeah, if you guys are thinking about learning Japanese, good luck, push through it. It's totally worth it. Unfortunately, I gotta get to work right now. I hope you guys enjoyed this story, and if you like this video, give it a like. We'll see you next time here on Chibo Cruise.